Coach Jackson, thank you for joining me today. If you kind of want, for those who don't know who you are or what you do, can you kind of just give people just a general background of who you are and kind of some of the stuff you've done?
Okay, I'm. This is just finishing my 31st year, so I've been doing this for a while. 21st year as a head coach. Um, I'm right now. I'm the head football coach and athletic coordinator at North Forney High School, which is about 20 miles east of Dallas. Uh, Started at a school of in '99 was my first head coaching job. There's 120 kids in high school, so moved up and North Forney's 1,900 kids, but so I think I have a good perspective of the small school and the larger schools. I've been a head coach at the biggest high school in Texas at one time, 6,000 students. So I've got to kind of live the whole gamut of it. 5 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago, I guess, I wrote a book that I didn't think would sell. My goal was to sell 100 copies, but I wrote it so I could go speak at clinics because I like to teach. Um, and so it's Culture Defeat Strategy. It's done well. It's over 7,000 copies, and so it's really opened a lot of doors for me. Wrote another book, just released it in January of this year. It's Culture Defeat Strategy 2, and so basically, I'm a head football coach and still love it. I still have a lot of years left in me, but I enjoy the teaching aspect, and I think coaching is one of the most honorable professions in the world, and so I enjoy doing this stuff too.
Now, one of the reasons I reached out to you was just mainly because of that culture aspect. I think you do a really good job for the people who haven't read your book. You outline it very well in your first book. Why? And this is kind of the intro of one of your books, but like, why is culture important? Why do you believe culture is the foundation and culture defeats strategy?
Well, I just think, and culture really, like, I think culture is the. I was on a podcast the other day and we were kind of laughing about it. He said he doesn't really allow the word culture to be used in it because it's so overused. But I do think this that it is everybody's so worried about scheme and X's and O's and and there's so much information out there that I mean young coaches can go to X and O lab and there's so many young coaches out there who knew way more than I knew about scheme and probably no more than I know about scheme now because you can just research it so much. But I think so many people are so worried about the newest RPO and they're not worried about if their players are running through the line, if their players or will lay in traffic for their assistant coach. I just think we're too caught up in the chalk wars and we don't understand that it's about guys who the team that plays the hardest normally wins and the team that doesn't want to let each other down, those kind of things. So I just am a big believer in um, chemistry and just the intangible part of it that I don't think people. I think that's the new edge. When I got in it 31 years ago, lifting weights and all that kind of stuff. Some people did a good. Well, I think everybody does a great job of lifting weights now. So how are you going to find the edge? In 2009, I got in the Tony Franklin system and learned how to play fast. That was a big edge in 2009, 10. But now people know how to play fast. So what is your edge? I think the mental game and culture is the new edge.
Okay, when and kind of going on that culture, obviously you're instituting players, but how, especially when you get new assistants, how do you institute your culture to your new assistants?
First of all, it's something I really talk about a lot in my interview process. Is here's what we're about. I want you to help me raise players. I want you to so I'm going to hire the who more than the what. So if I have a linebacker position open, I want to hire someone who understands linebackers. Hopefully, he's coached them before and all that kind of stuff. But if I have two candidates and one of them I think is more on board with the father son relationship and helping me raise players and we'll spend time with them and take them to eat and things like that. He can be a lesser resume than maybe somebody who's coached linebackers longer, but I just don't feel like games just aren't won in the film room. Games are won by sitting across from your players and eating with them, and those are the guys I'm looking for. And so the first part of that answer is I got to do a great job and vet those guys and sometimes I miss, but for the most part, I try to find guys whose hearts are in the right place, and usually the rest of it takes care of itself. And then I think it's you acclimate them, you talk about it, and we meet as a staff quite a bit. I believe this, the only thing that really happens is what you talk about daily. And so not only do we talk to our team daily about what we're about, but I'm in our staff meetings, we're talking about it too. So, in our staff meetings, I've learned this just through the years is, you just can't say, okay, guys, man, I need you to develop relationships with your players off the field. I need you to do this. You really have to put it out there of like, hey, Coach Smith, when's the last time you did something? Not accusingly or anything like that, but you really have to ask them, okay, hey, when's the last time you ate with your unit? Or it's, hey guys, who's ate with their unit the last week? And eventually people are going to get that, that feeling and of, okay, coach isn't going to let this go. And so I think first of all, you have to hire the right guys and ask the right questions. And then you have to talk about it daily, and it just has to be a part of your fabric.
All right, Coach. During this difficult time, how have you maintained culture with not only your staff but your players? How have you continued to teach it? How have you continued to work on it? How have you kept that going in this critical and weird time?
Well, I think we have done a good job. I'm all about systems, so we meet 3 times a week with our team on Monday, and I think this is important to say too. Is we were having staff meetings with our school at 9 a.m. So I thought, okay, we'll do team meetings at 8:30 a.m. Well, that went over like a lead balloon. Like I should have known better. Our players are staying up late and they're getting up late, and so. I had a meeting with my seniors and I said, when do y'all want to do these? And so we decided on noon. It's been way better, right? Of course. And so I lead a meeting on Monday. On Wednesday, they meet with their position coach, and it's more video and things like that. And then on Friday, we meet and we have guest speakers. So the last 3 weeks, we have Malik Jefferson, who I coached in high school, plays for the Chargers now. Tyler Patman just got out of the NFL as a DB. And then this morning, we met with Armani Watts, who's actually a North Forney alumni, who's a DB for the Chiefs. And so I think we've done it where, again, I'm a big, Pete Carroll says this, you got to fascinate your players. And so I think if we did anything, if I met with them 3 times a week, it would suck, right? They wouldn't want to do that. And if their position coach met with them, so we try to vary it up, keep it where it's fresh. I think that's the best thing we've been able to do. We're going to get to start meeting with them June 8th. And so basically, even when in March, I knew we just got to get through this. Our culture, we're not going to be able to teach the way we used to teach. We just kind of got to get through it some. And I think we've done a pretty good job of fighting to a tie, for lack of a better term. I think we just fight to a tie during the COVID. I think our guys have worked out some. And then June 8th, we'll start back full bore.
Now, you mentioned something interesting there about speakers, and obviously all 3 of those speakers you mentioned are very successful and done a very good job at what they do. But just in general, when you're looking for speakers for your team, whether they're alumni, former football players, community members, people of influence, what are your requirements, or how do you look for speakers for your team?
That's a great question. I want to find guys who have been, so I've got guys just like you do who think they want to go play college ball, but they're really not the hardest workers in the world. And so I'm looking for guys who have been there, who can tell my guys, because that's really what we talk about a bunch is what's the difference in high school football and Division I football, and then what's the difference in that in the NFL. But one of my speakers was the player of the year in his conference who had to go to counseling because his head coach treated him so bad. I mean, that's real talk, and every speaker has given their cell number out to my guys in the chat. And so I think I want like Armani Watts talk. I asked him today, I said, hey, I don't think anybody's vocal anymore. I think people text. I don't think people talk enough. I said, we're always trying to get our players to be vocal. At the Chiefs is the culture at practice of vocality, or I don't know how the word is, right? And he said, yes, coach. He said, we wouldn't have won the Super Bowl if we wouldn't have had guys like Tyrann Mathieu getting on people's butt during practice. And I stopped him and I'm like, guys, are y'all grasping this? And so those are the kind of things that I want our guys to hear, things that we struggle to get our guys to do. He talks about, all of them have talked about how much film study you have to do. And just basically, I want to find speakers that'll pour into our guys of, hey, you can make it just like I did, but you can't make it by working out only when your coach tells you. You got to do more.
Kind of the next direction I want to hit is, how are you? I mean, obviously we've all lost time. Weight room, scheme, culture. Like, we're doing the best we can given circumstances. What is your what is your initial focus for culture when you get back? I mean, you said June 8th. Like, we're May 26th. I mean, we can start in the weight room. So what is your first priority in developing and continuing to grow your culture when you get back?
My biggest, y'all, this is the truth. It is not about getting them in shape or getting them stronger. I mean, football season's still quite a bit of ways. My main focus when we get back June the 8th is bonding together as a team. Like, I just think in this day, even in Texas, there's other things to do other than football. You know, so on June the 8th, man, I want to have a big love fest. I want to work out some. We don't have our guidelines yet of how we're going to be able to work out. But on June the 8th, if I could, we would have and I guess I can, grill hot dogs or whatever, hamburgers, and just celebrate being back together. And so it's funny you asked that question, because that's, as I'm thinking this through my head, we're going to do something like that. Now, our kids are itching, right, to work out. So we're going to work out some, but I don't think that should be anybody's priority. It ought to be, I mean, if we're preaching family, it ought to be like a family reunion. I think that's where we need to spend our first couple of days, man, is just getting back and loving being together.
How, especially when we get back. I mean, we all have those kids who have very difficult home lives. I mean, some of us have more than others, but all of us have that. How have you supported them in this awkward time with them being stuck at home, where maybe they don't have the support they need? Um, or how are you going to continue to support them when we get back and try to adjust them back? I mean, after probably being 2.5 months of being in a situation that has not been good for them mentally and physically, how are you going to try to get them back to where they need to be for their mental and physical health?
Well, I think I'm telling you, I really should have said this on the last question, but when I first started, guys, here's for you younger guys, don't freak out that they haven't been as active as they would have been. Okay. So when I first started coaching 31 years ago, we would start fall camp, and the first week of fall camp would be getting them in shape, because it just wasn't the way it is now, right? And so every kids just do a better job of working out in the summers than they used to. So I like I just think to support these kids who haven't had it, we have to, man, this first few weeks, we have to really make sure, because all we've been able to do is Zoom with them. And so we have staff meetings, and I'll ask my coaches, because here's the thing as a head coach, is I feel like relationally, I'm the dad. My job is to maintain the culture. So I'm the dad. This household has got to run the way I want it to run. The assistant coaches are the uncles, which means they're following the home rules. I mean, but the uncle's a little different. We all had that uncle that was a pretty good guy, right? And so he wasn't going to let us do anything dumb, but he still wasn't quite dad. So I guess what I'm saying is when we get back, now that we see each other in person, we have to really take advantage of that and make sure that we're being more intentional about just where are you? Are you okay? And I know we've been asking them that through Zoom and things like that, but it's a lot different in person. So don't freak out, y'all, about, man, we're going to lift and run. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're going to lift and run. Our guys are itching to. They want to work out. We're going to do all that, but you got plenty of time to get them in shape before your first scrimmage or anything like that. You really got to take care of their mental state, and you got to really I really think this is the year where everybody's culture has a chance. Like you should have the greatest team chemistry ever, because no one should take for granted. Here's what I think about, Coach. I'm sorry, man. I just start rambling.
You're good, Coach.
Here's what I think is so great about intentional culture that I think is the book has helped people with is so many people just hope for the best. And they have great players and they win. Okay. And they don't have great players. They don't win as much. Some years they have great chemistry. Some years they don't. And so I think you have to have it. Culture is an intentional way to build that chemistry. And because no one's going to take for granted that they're together, that this is the year that you should have the best culture and chemistry you've ever had, because you should appreciate being together more.
Awesome, Coach, and I agree. My next question, we talked a little bit about this before we started this actual video. And I'm gonna kind of make it into 3 parts. Is one, do you think, say you're in year 2, 3, 4 of being a head coach somewhere? I mean, it's obvious. Can you reset your culture at that point? If you can, do you think that, given the current circumstances, that this might be the perfect thing to help reset it, an opportunity to change that? And then kind of the third part of it is, how do you reset the culture? Like, if you can, how? Like, it's kind of a 3-part question, but take that in what direction you want.
So here's the smart alecky answer is no, you can't. You cannot reset your culture, but your players can. So you can also, I just got off a Zoom with a guy from, honestly, in Ohio, and he's like, man, I'm coach. This is year 3 coming up, and we have not been good. We're losing numbers. Kids are transferring. I'm like, yes, you can, but the only way you can is to get players to help you. So years ago, I read a book by Pat Riley, and I totally can't remember what the name of it, but it doesn't matter. And he takes over for the Lakers, and he says, I knew when I took over, I had to win over 2 guys, Kareem and Magic. If I won over Kareem and Magic, it was all going to be okay. So if you're in year 3 or 4 and you need to reset your culture, which you probably do. If you don't have core values, shame on you. Here's what I say. If I visited your school, and I got to speak to SMU last spring, and here's what I told Coach Dykes and his staff. If your guys hit a knee in front of me and I said, what is SMU football about? If they don't give me some similar answers, you don't have a culture. If you came to North Forney and asked my guys, they would say juice, competition, blue collar tough, family, and discipline. And those are our core values. So if you don't have core values, you got to get them. It's easy to get them. You let your players be involved in them, but it is not a big deal to reset a culture and really get it going, but you got to let your players be involved. And here's how I would do it. And here's what I told that coach from Ohio today is I call them unity lunches. So every summer I have lunch once or twice a week with different kids, and I'll have 8 to 9 kids. I'll invite an assistant coach. We'll talk about their lives. Like, I'll ask questions like TV, Netflix, or YouTube. And it's almost all YouTube, by the way. But, I just talk to them about how I grew. They want to know about us, right? They want to know us. They want you to know them, right? And so they love them. And so if I was going to reset a culture, I would find this was a pretty small school. I told this coach, you need to get 4 guys who ride for the brand, and you need to have lunch with them 5 or 6 times, lay out your vision, and tell them it is on you. I cannot do this. If y'all are, like, he's worried about their school going from 11 to 8, man. I said, this might be too blunt, but I would tell these kids, if y'all want this school to stay 11, man, it's up to you four guys. And let's figure it out together. So they want that. They want to feel like, when I was a kid, nobody asked my opinion. Nobody gave a crap where I wanted to go out to eat, any of that. Well, kids today have a voice. They're liking things, retweeting things. Their voice is heard. They're TikTok stars, right? And so if you think you're going to run a program or reset a culture, establish a culture, and not let them be involved, I think you're missing the boat. Just kids are different today. But if you'll let them be involved, they will run with it. Kids aren't watching cat videos anymore. They're making them, right? They want to be a part of it. So you will have, it will be the best thing you do in your career if you go to some kids and say, here's what I want our program to be about. What do you think? Do you agree? What do you want it to be about? Now help me do it. They will freaking love it.
That's awesome, Coach. I got two more questions for you before we wrap up. And this first one you reminded me of, because this is always a question I've had. And I've always had this for anybody that uses core values. And we have 3 for our football program. How often do you update the core values? Now, I'm not talking about, obviously the process to get there, but I'm talking you obviously have your 3 to 5. These are our values. How often do you update those? Because obviously you have, every 4 years you'll have a completely different crew. It won't even be the same kids from that when you say you started a job 4 years ago. That 5th year, you don't have anybody that's the same at that point. So at what point do you update those or change those?
I hate this question, okay? All right, but it's a great question. So here's the answer is I don't know. Okay. So I was at Grapevine 2 years, and we did, so then I left. Well, this is my 4th year at North Forney, so I hadn't been doing this forever. But I can tell you this, I've debated this question a lot. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I think if I went to my players today and I said, do y'all want to change any core values? The answer would be no. But here's another big part of this thing, y'all. If you're not, we have so much advertising, that's not the right word, displays of our core values. So at our athletic banquet, there's not an offensive player of the year, a defensive player of the year. There's a juice player of the year, a competition player of the year, blue collar, and our kids vote on it. And so we have wall wraps of players who have won these awards. And so there's branding is the word I'm looking for. There's so much branding of our core values that I think it'd be hard to change them, but I don't think our players would want to. But I will say this, I think after a few years, if you did change 1 or 2, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think you're going to have to spend some money to rebrand. I just think for us, okay, when our kids walk into our facility on Wednesday is Blue Collar Tough. We're playing a song called Tough Enough by the Fabulous Thunderbirds, right? So we are just, you and I mentioned, we talked about PJ Fleck before we started recording. I went to a PJ Fleck team meeting one time. It's in my 2nd book. And there's a song playing before he comes in, and an assistant coach looks at me and says, Coach, there's not ever one song played here that's not intentional. And I'm like, wow. And so when I got back to North Forney, I thought we got to be more intentional about our music. And so our music, maybe not during practice and but when they come in and get dressed and all that, it's about our core value of the day. So I just think if you're just that intentional and you're really selling your core values, your kids won't want to change them.
Whether it's a current program or you become a head coach of a new program, how do you deal with it if you don't have any senior leaders? Now, whether you've done a poor job at developing this class or whether there's not a natural leader, we can argue semantics whether one can be developed or not, and everybody's got different opinions on that. How do you handle that? Do you continue to focus on developing those leaders? Or if you see maybe there's some natural leaders at lower classes, do you now try to push them into that? How do you handle when you have a leadership void at the top of your players?
Well, we do. So I tell my parents, when your son is in our football program, they're in a leadership academy that happens to play football. So we're meeting with our players every day. Again, Pete Carroll, I love Pete Carroll and PJ Fleck. Those are kind of guys I would want to play for. And so Pete Carroll says you got to fascinate them every day. PJ Flex says you got to use a movie clip every day to kind of bring home your message. So we're doing pretty good stuff with our players. We're showing them a PowerPoint every day with a movie clip, and we're getting them to talk. And so, but here's another thing too is we don't use the term leadership as much. Here's what I tell my players is everybody doesn't have to be a leader, but everybody can be an encourager. So I think that's a less intimidating term. So we're going to call on guys during our classroom time and get them to talk, but we really want them to be encouragers. But the true leaders that you're talking about, the captains, if I don't have enough in my senior class, I'm going to do the thing you said second. I'm going to focus on the sophomore. If I got a sophomore who's a natural leader, I'm going to let him lead. I mean, I'm not going to just count on because, being a senior doesn't guarantee you much in our program. I mean, I'm kind of branching off a little bit here, but our program is like when the season's over with, everybody's moving out of the varsity locker room. They're getting a white T-shirt with a question mark on it. They got to earn their way back in. We don't care what grade they're in, right? So I think if that's part of your culture where everybody has to earn everything, then, a great book out there, y'all, called Leaders Eat Last, which in the military, in the chow hall, the higher your rank are, the farther back in line you are. And so I think don't let it just be about seniors, man. Let everybody be a part of it. Put it on, because those sophomores, sometimes they can be big time, and sometimes your seniors are hurting you anyway. Your seniors are the ones who are in the locker room. I mean, we monitor our locker rooms, but you know what I mean? The seniors are back there not getting to play enough, and sometimes they're hurting you anyway.
Coach, that's fantastic. I thank you for coming on and talking. Kind of to close this up, two things. One, do you have any lasting thoughts on culture or anything you want to get off your mind regarding culture? And then two, how can people get a hold of you and or get a hold of your books and or any other resources that you put out there?
So here's what I want to leave everybody with is I used to think being a great coach was watching huddle and trying to figure out some secret, right? Like one year in the playoffs, I knew if our opponent was going to run or pass by their quarterback's feet in the shotgun, right? And y'all, I'm telling you, before every play on Thursday, we figured this out. So I used to just spend so much time on huddle. So we knew before the play whether it was going to be run or pass. They scored 62 points on us that game, right? They were just great. And so one thing I've learned since 2015 is being a great leader is not watching huddle. Being a great leader is listening to podcasts, doing what you're doing now, reading books. I used to never read books. It can't just be football books. It's got to be mental game stuff. And so quit listening to the radio when you're in your car. Listen to an audio book, listen to a podcast. So I guess what I'm saying is, guys, is X's and O's, all that stuff is great. But if I knew then what I knew now, it'd be I wouldn't have watched so much King of Queens and Seinfeld. I'd have been reading books. You can get in touch with me, y'all. Twitter, I'm a big Twitter guy, Coach Jackson TPW. I've got a website. I sell a lot of PowerPoints and resources on my website. I've got an offensive clinic that I started doing. We're the Art Briles offense, and I guess I shouldn't say that or I'm going to get sued, but in 2017, I hired a Baylor assistant, and so we don't really tell anybody about it because it's so freaking awesome. But I got bored in the quarantine, so I started having classes over it. My next class is June 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, and it'll be seriously a learning experience. It's unbelievable how simple it is, but all that stuff's on my website, and so. But I'd be honored to if you want to email me. I send the emails out Monday and Thursday about culture. You can subscribe to those on my website. And if you just want to reach out, I'm at culture@coachrandyjackson.com. And I'm always looking to grow the profession and make new friends. So reach out and I'll be happy to get back with you.